that very kind introduction. Well, ladies and gentlemen, the blend of finance and innovation, also known as Finnovation, is very much revolutionizing the industry. And in this sector, as we know, change is the only constant. So it's vital that we understand what to expect next. And who better to answer this question than my next guest? Very warm welcome, yes, to Dr. Peter Gassmann. Lovely to have you here.
Thanks, Laura. Thank you, Laura, again, for the introduction.
Good stuff. Right, let's start off with some scene setting. Tell us a little bit more about Strategy and the markets you cover and what exactly you're seeing when it comes to the Finnovation trends across global markets, and how exactly does that compare to the Middle East region as well?
Yeah, thank you very much. So Strategy is actually the strategy consultancy of PwC. We cover actually the world, so I see quite a bit. When people ask me where you're based, I used to say I'm based in airports, actually. And what we see here is a very dynamic region. I'm quite impressed also with the Fintech event here. I think what you see in the GCC region, but in particular in Dubai, it's quite amazing. And let me just talk a little bit about what we see in the Fintech space. So we are also leading in the financial services area, and Fintech is, of course, an area that we're really looking into. Now, as we heard in the earlier panel, I think we are at a very dynamic area and era with the new developments like Gen AI and other new stuff. We heard about payments, and I'm sure we will talk about this as well. Now, we also saw after the Corona crisis with the rising interest rate that some of the valuation of fintechs were actually declining, and that some fintechs had some issues to get to the next financing round. I think there's nothing that would hinder the development of fintechs. It's just we get a bit more reality into the mix. I think now the investors are looking more into solid business cases, not just growth, but also the margin. And I'm sure we will find this here as well. If you ask in particular about the GCC region, now this is amazing. We have more than 500 fintechs now compared to 100 in 2019 when I look at the data. So it's just amazing, the development. However, there's still room to grow. When we compare this by number of KPIs, you can take the percentage of fintech investment compared to the GDP, or you can take others. For example, only 17%, 17% in the Middle East is using digital banking compared to 60% in the United States. Okay. So there is still room to grow.
Yeah, it's definitely still room to grow. A lot of optimism, as you said there. Let's talk a little bit about banking, actually, because you mentioned the banks. So when looking at the traditional banking sector, is there room for growth in this sector? And why do you think people are turning towards more alternative payment solutions? And what are you seeing within banks as well to stay more competitive as well? Is there a lot of competition?
Yeah, I think the panel just before our panel, we were talking about this quite a bit, and you saw also that banks are really working with fintechs now. We see a lot of cooperation. I think this is very important because for the banks, it's also important. We looked at this, and when we asked the CEOs or CEOs or CIOs, their work with fintechs for a number of reasons. I think one, and really foremost, is to get access to those capabilities, to the young talent, which is very important. They have a great way to participate in new innovation, which also it's enabled by working together with fintechs. And then some of the fintechs have really interesting business models, which are geared towards a constant stream of fee income rather than interest rate. At the moment, as we heard earlier, all banks are quite happy with the level of interest rate that we see, but there is still the need to go into stable income stream, and then you can work with fintechs. And also having access to new customer, which they could not access before. We heard earlier the whole discussion of payments, and there was the discussion. This is really important, of course, in the region. I mean, as we heard earlier, this is the place which is #1 in terms of remittance. This is very important. And the new payment innovation, it's convenient, seamless, cross-border payment is much cheaper. So you see that there's a number of reasons why people really love it. I think one prime reason what we see is users want seamless and really easy to use applications. And fintech sometimes have a better edge in understanding the customer journey, what is needed. You can do stuff with a few clicks. And I think that's what we see, and that's very important, of course.
It's definitely all about customer experience, ease of use, that seamless experience, and making sure that you keep your customer base as well. You don't want people to sort of veer off to competition, do you? How do you stay ahead of the game when it comes to that side of things as well? How do you think sort of fintech needs to help, you know, maintain its customer base?
Exactly, and you need to spend time to understand this. I can tell you, in particular, the younger generation, they would not accept any application, any customer journey that's cumbersome. They expect, and maybe rightly so, that's easy to use and right at their fingertips.
So I suppose you get used to something, don't you, when you're using one of these apps? You get used to it, it's just sort of your go-to. But I was having a conversation earlier with my former panelists, and they were saying, you know, I was saying, actually, it's recommendations as well. I've got, you know, quite a high-maintenance friend, and if she says, oh, you've got to go for this, because she's got, you know, very good taste and, you know, says, yeah, high maintenance, you know, a customer, you know, it's all to do with that side of things as well.
I mean, this actually leads into the discussion that I have with many clients, which is, of course, the super apps. We cannot talk about fintechs when we do not talk about the super apps. And what you see is in some region, particularly in Asia, of course, we have the well-known super apps. I don't have to mention them. Everybody knows them. And that's exactly what it is. It's so easy to use. People like it. People go to it. And then they build many different applications. They integrate many different services that are easy to use, and they generate a constant fee of it. Actually, to some extent, that I spoke to some of the super app CEOs, and of course, they don't want to be called banks because they want to be called like the everyday go-to, as you said, the everyday go-to app that people like. Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit actually about the rise of the super apps, because not many people have actually cracked this. So do you see a rise in this sector? What's it going to take to get there, to get that innovation to that level? And is there going to be a lot more competition, do you think?
Yeah, we see more competition. Many people are trying to get into the space, not just banks, so not just classical fintechs from a financial service area. We see people coming from the telco space. We see even some retailer trying to move into that space because they have the access to the customer. And of course, we see the hyperscaler as well. And it's interesting to see what they will develop going further. I think the art is really to keep the customer to the app. And they use it for many different services. As I said, for recommendation. They can buy tickets. In some countries, actually, in Asia, they have integrated some governmental services onto the app. So actually, you don't have to leave the app for many other services. Now, and then it links back to our discussion on alternative payments. You can build on those alternative payments adjacent services like buy now, pay later services, and so on and so forth. So I think we will see a lot more competition and a lot more development in that space. What is really needed there is that you understand what the customer wants, that you understand a seamless customer journey, and that's, of course, very tough. Many have tried. I'm afraid not many have really succeeded.
We'll see how many more come into this space. Generative AI, of course, we've got to talk about it. We've heard about this across most of our panels, of course, but, you know, of course, it is the year of AI and machine learning. So what further integration of AI technologies are you seeing come on board? What can we get excited about? How is this going to change the landscape, and who is set to benefit?
So what we're doing at the moment with the banks, and then I will talk about fintechs as well. So basically, everybody tries to really understand what it can do, but I agree with the previous speaker. The development is so tremendous that you need to look at it basically every month, and things have developed, and you need to be really on top of the development. So many institutions at the moment, they're doing no regret moves. They're trying to implement it with the first use cases, and I would maybe structure it a little bit along the lines of what can you do in terms of marketing. We had the discussion about hyper-personalized services. Everybody get each personal banker, but also hyper-personalized services that you can offer and that you can suggest. Of course, more mundane pieces like summaries, documentation, it's coming. And then we also heard about, and we see this quite a lot in the space of risk and compliance, know your customer areas, anti-money laundering. And in this space, we see a number of fintechs who are probably more agile, who have maybe better access to the talent that you need to develop those services. So we expect and we see a number of specific fintechs focusing on those areas I've just mentioned, but then really leveraging Gen AI much more than before. And the development is amazing. Maybe one prerequisite, what we also see is that in order to really leverage Gen AI to the full scale, you need to have your data, and you need to have a good set of curated data, as we call it. So the whole development into the cloud is very important, and of course we see this in the region here as well. We saw quite big announcement of everybody trying to build clouds here in the region. It's very important, actually. Yeah.
I wanted to talk a little bit about the risk culture here in the Middle East. There's obviously a big drive here in the region when it comes to SMEs, of course, which predominantly make up sort of 75% of GDP across many economies. So what can you tell us about the risk culture here in the Middle East and what that means for Finnovation and innovation within that space as well?
Yeah, I think risk culture, let me start maybe with some examples where I see that I think regulators have done a very good job to build the framework, and particularly I think also here in the UAE, the whole story around open banking. I think they were one of the first countries in the region that really developed a very good open banking framework that fostered innovation. So I think the idea of providing guardrails in which we can have innovation is very good, and I think when I look at the banks, they seem to be quite solid. So the risk culture, I think it's quite intact. Now, maybe look at this from another angle. This is a region with a very young, energized population, and I think they're just more switched on, trying new things. People like to be here. They are also attract people from outside. So in some region, you see people are worried first when we talk about innovation, when we talk about Gen AI. They see all the risk and less the opportunities. I think there could be huge opportunity for the region here to see the opportunity first and then the risk. So that's important. Yeah, the SME story is quite important, and I think, again, innovation plays a very important role. I used to be a banker myself for many years, and SME banking for classical banks, it's quite difficult. Very difficult to be profitable in the area, very difficult to have specific offerings. Now, what we see is on the back of innovation, on the back of payment solution, we see quite some fintechs coming in, focusing on SMEs, and they're quite successful because they do it in a lean way, they do it in a very specific way, and I think next to payment, next to alternative payments areas, this is an innovation in the region to look out for.
Perfect. What should we be looking at going forward then? You've mentioned a digital savvy, young population. We've spoken about SMEs. What are the other opportunities we need to be aware of in order to foster growth, especially working together within the GCC as well? Is that an element that we need to be focusing on, or do we need to do it sort of per country? And talent as well, as you mentioned.
Absolutely. I think you mentioned already quite a number of important areas. And some of this have been addressed, I think. So I think We have places like this. We have the attention that fintech innovation is something that's very important, takes the industry to the next level. You mentioned the young population. It's very important. I mean, the MENA region in total, you know, they have 30% are between 19 and 29, so it's amazing. And they're relatively well educated if you compare this to other regions. So that's there. At the same time, I think it's still important to attract professionals, to attract international talent as well, and I think we're also seeing that development as well. So the combination, I think it's quite important. What is also important is, of course, we see funds, we see a number of wealth that's investing into fintechs. I think we would benefit from an even more lively scene of institutional investors. And I think there is a way to foster this even more. It's very important that fintechs have good access to capital and they have good access to the next round of innovation. As I said, in the last year, we saw some fintechs struggling really with the next series of their capitalization. And the last point I would probably mention is really, and you addressed this, of course, it's also very important to work together. Scale for some of the business models is very important. So it's just important that fintechs have the opportunity to go abroad. That's actually a trend we see. We see a number of fintechs in some areas which are very successful in their country, which is very good, in Asia, in Europe, and elsewhere. And they are now going abroad to address broader populations. So, you know, they go to Latin America from Europe, or from Asia to Europe, or to the region here. So the internationalization is definitely a trend.
And do you think there needs to be more of a collective approach here in the GCC? What's your take on that?
Yeah, of course. That's always what people are hoping for. I think it's okay if you focus on your country first and then build the relationship, build the environment, build the regulatory setting. But we should not forget that there is an opportunity, if this region works together, that there could be a much broader scale that could be addressed. So that could also be, of course, very, very important, yeah.
Very quickly, before we wrap up, you mentioned funding, of course. Now, payments and lending saw the largest share of total fintech investment and funding last year. Are there any other segments that we should get excited about as well? Do you see more money coming into different areas?
Yeah, I think there are a few interesting areas. I mean, payment, of course, will be very important. We see banking as a services coming in, which is also quite interesting. The whole area of sustainability is coming in the region. We had COP28, which was a big push. And this is linking fintech with green tech and the whole question, how can you help to transform this? We were speaking about RegTech in the area of areas like anti-money laundering, know your customer, but also other areas. The whole risk and credit risk processes that could be supported. And I think the last one I would also mention, of course, which is very important, next to SME, the other side is wealth banking. We see fintechs really focusing on this, which is very important as well, yeah.
We have a minute left, so I'd like to ask your key takeaway. What is the key message that you would like to leave our audience with here today? What should we be looking out for?
Time is flying, thanks. No, I'm really impressed, to be honest, with the dynamic I see here. I think the region has gotten a few things right. So the basics is there. We have a great opportunity. We have the talent. We have the ambition. I think there are all the ingredients. If we manage to attract a broader investor, an international investor base, if we manage to get the talent, and if we manage to create some scale, I'm very positive. I'm sure we see a number of leading international fintech players, you know, based here. So that would be my vision and taking back.
Very exciting indeed. Very exciting to see how this is all going to play out as well. So thank you so much for your words of advice. Thank you so much. And ladies and gentlemen, let's hear it for Dr. Peter Gassmann. Thank you.
Thanks, Laura. Thanks.